Kathleen, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Hernandez. Here. Commissioner Lopez. Here. Commissioner Seifert. Here. Commissioner White O'Neill. Here. Chair Giggers.
I also. Approval of Planning Commission minutes of November 1st. If all of the commissioners have had a chance to take a look at that, if there are any comments, please make them. Otherwise, we need a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment. On the vote, I was actually the one that abstained. I think Commissioner Seifert was the one that was voted aye. I recused myself from that.
Which item number was that?
Item
Two?
for DJ's Sober Transitional Facility.
Item number 1.
One, rather.
Item number one,
Okay.
sorry.
All right, please note that, and we will alter that. Thank you very much. Anything else? No?
I move that we approve the minutes for the November 1st, 2017 with the changes requested. Second.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions? Motion carries. There you go. Motion carries. Public comment period. Each member of the audience may address the commission on any subject within the commission's business. Each member of the audience and each subject is limited to the discussion of 3 minutes or is otherwise directed by the chair. Does anyone wish to discuss anything not on the agenda? No? Nancy? Sure. All right. I don't want to skip you this time. All right, then we will move on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar is approved with one motion. These items are read only on request of commission members. Should anyone, including members of the public, wish to discuss or disapprove any item, it must be dropped from the blanket motion and considered as a separate item. Does anyone wish to discuss or drop anything? No?
No.
Then we need a motion.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstention? Opposed? Motion carries. And we will move on to item number 3. Pepper Tree Chevron Gas Station Plan Development Permit at 1601 North Broadway. Can we hear from staff on this?
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. This is an existing gas station site that has been in this location since the late 1960s. The 1,400 square foot site is located at the northwest corner of North Broadway and West Donovan Road. It is adjacent but not part of the Pepper Tree Plaza Shopping Center. So it is a separate parcel and separately owned. It is within the Entrada specific plan. The facility today consists of an approximately 2,000 square foot structure which contains a small convenience store and 3 auto repair bays. There's also a 1,200 square foot gas canopy and 4 pumps equating to 8 pumping stations. There are no striped parking spaces on the site currently, and the site has approximately 8% landscape currently. The applicant proposes to demolish all the structures on the site and significantly reconfigure the site with new structures and a new layout. This new site will look as depicted on the slide, similar in configuration with the building up against the north west corner of the site and the canopy oriented towards Broadway. 2 major aspects of this site that are occurring are there are 2 existing driveways that are close to the Broadway Donovan intersection, which are being eliminated. This allows for more room on the site, better internal circulation, and also allows for additional landscape to be added as well. This new layout incorporates 5 striped parking spaces and more than meets the 8 parking spaces required for the development. And it also increases the landscape area to the minimum required of 15%. The proposed building is approximately 1,800 square feet and will also include 740 square feet of upstairs office and storage And the new fuel canopy approximately doubles or a little more than doubles in size from the one that's there today, and is 3,400 square feet, and will have 6 pumps as opposed to the 4 that exist today. The architecture of the building includes multiple materials, standing seam metal roofs, stone wainscot, and stucco exterior with various textures and colors employed to add some detailing and some variation to the building. There will also be some decorative cornice caps, down lighting, and metal awnings in certain locations. The building itself is approximately 27 feet tall. And for a better look at the colors on this graphic did not come through correctly. Here's the colors that are going to be proposed for the exterior. You've got 2 main body colors of a tan and a lighter tan. The standing seam metal roof is a blue-gray. They have maroon detailing, and that'll be for the metal awnings, the light fixtures, and some of the stucco reveals. You have a gray stacked stone wainscot, and then gray sills of stone. Now the gray stone and the sills will also be incorporated into the canopy columns. And here's a graphic of the canopy. It has the same color, blue-gray standing seam metal roof, and the stone wainscot, as you can see on the column bases. So we did receive one letter in opposition to this project. It was from the Dollar Tree store that is in the Pepper Tree Plaza. And you all have a copy of the letter that they provided on the dais. The letter is absent of a reason for their opposition, so I spoke to their representative this morning. It is a company policy of Dollar Tree to oppose any gas stations near their facilities. Any gas station. Apparently, Dollar Tree had been in the gas station business and had quite a few problems with the gas stations they had. And from that, they don't want gas stations near their existing locations. So that concludes staff's presentation. Our recommendation is the Planning Commission approve this plan development permit for the reconstruction of this gas station site.
Thank you very much, Frank. Is there any questions for staff at this time?
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Frank, on the drive approaches, so we're eliminating that one on Broadway, but there's an additional one that's off property? Is that going to be how are they accessing?
Correct. Let me go to the site plan here. So there is one driveway approach off of North Broadway, and that's shared with Pepper Tree Plaza. The property configuration is as it's shown here with a small notch, and that notch goes right into the center of that one entrance driveway here. There's a second driveway very close to the intersection. That's one of the driveways that's going to be eliminated.
Okay.
And then as you go around the corner onto Donovan, this is actually 2 separate driveways. And again, the closest to the intersection is going to be eliminated. This driveway will be widened slightly, the one that remains. But it is a much better configuration in terms of ingress and egress and conflict at the intersections than what we have today.
Is there a median on the north of the road? I mean, are people traveling north going to be able to turn into the facility?
They would have to make a left turn onto Donovan and then a right into the facility.
Okay.
Or they could go up to the intersection at West Williams and eventually make their way through the parking lot. This will still be open between the 2 properties to gain access into the station.
Thank you.
Further questions? No? All right. Do we have a representative from the applicant here? And would they like to make a comment? No? All right. We're going to let it stand, probably wisely. Then I will bring it back. Is there any written communication other than the one already discussed? No? Okay. And no public comment? Kathleen? No? All right. Then we will go ahead and close that and bring it back to us. And does anybody have any comments they would like to make on it, or any questions, further questions?
I'd like to make a comment. I drove by there over the weekend, and I think it's a good design. It is always really busy. You can't, as of now, you can't make a left turn if you're traveling north because there's already a center divider there anyway. So I think it'll improve, shutting off that entrance will improve the ingress and egress flow of traffic. So I think it's going to be successful.
Further question?
I like the design. I drive through that end of town, and I'm just hoping that we can get more businesses that are willing to improve the properties. We have a lot of decrepit signs and buildings, and I find this refreshing. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that area has a lot of, I don't know, landlords not managing their properties very well, so I'm happy to see a owner that wants to beautify the area, add more landscaping, which I think it desperately needs. And I think that the Extra Mile brand is a very successful, popular brand, and I think the imagery and the design is going to really enhance that corner. So I'm happy with the project.
Super. No comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had one comment for the owners, and I was wondering if they would consider adding the extra long hose so you can fill from either side of the vehicle. It just makes circulation a little bit better.
An extra long.
Yeah. Just so you don't have to turn around and you come
I know,
in.
that is
It's so helpful.
especially with ingress and egress a little
Especially
compromised.
since we're losing.
Yeah.
Well, staff will definitely, through the building permit process, work with the applicant and see if there can be some accommodation for that. If you'd like, please
Certainly,
step
sir.
to the dais and state your name and address, please.
Excuse me, I'm Skip Couts, I'm the owner. We can look into that, certainly. I guess I was just talking the contractors here too as well, and he said we could probably do that with no problem. But we'll have to look into it, make sure that can happen.
You're not limited by any corporate constraints or franchisee
Not that
constraints?
I'm aware of, no. We're independently franchised, so we pretty much do what, as long as, well, I'll have to check into that as well, let's put it that way, but I don't believe so.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hey, one last
Yes, sir.
question for staff. And the reason that the drive apron is, or the driveway apron is going to be left, is that a Caltrans thing? Not wanting to work through Caltrans to remove that apron that's closest to the intersection? Number 7 on your,
The,
2.
that should be something that, that may just be an error on the plans, because my thought is that is something that should be removed. But I will work with our engineering staff and the applicant as well. There's no sense of leaving a curb cut. It might mislead people, and so we'll work with the applicant. But my thinking is that was to be removed.
Further questions? I just have one quick comment. I agree with everything that the other commissioners have said here. I very much appreciate the fact that you guys are looking to upgrade and to beautify the facilities you have there, and to produce more landscaping. So thank you very much. And with that, we need a motion. Oh, and one additional question.
Commissioner Lopez, when you say a longer hose, you're just saying so that when you pull up, you're not stretching across, you're just trying to, if your outlet on your car is on the opposite side, that you have enough hose to get over? Okay, thank you. I wasn't quite sure.
There you go.
So, where are we at? I would make a motion that we approve Plan Development Permit PD 2017-007.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Good luck, folks. Number 4, Skyway Office Building Plan Development Permit at 3250 Skyway Drive.
Come get me when you can.
And we have one abstention. Recusal, I'm sorry, not abstention.
Recusal.
Oh, here's the People will know you're perfect, and you don't want that getting out.
You're going rogue.
Good evening, my name is Laura Marcelia. I'm an assistant planner with the City of Santa Maria. Tonight I'm presenting the Skyway Office Building. It's a planned development permit at 3250 Skyway Drive. This was submitted by Palacios Architects. It's a project to develop a 1.3 acre site. It's in a PDM1 zoning district, the Planned Development Light Manufacturing District. To the left is the Santa Maria Times, and that's this building right here. To the south is the airport, and the Hagerman softball complex is just over here. It's an open space district. This project went to study session on October 19th, 2017, and there weren't any major issues brought up. I think we resolved everything at that meeting. This is the site plan. It's a 2-story office building. They're proposing 19,861 square feet. The first floor is currently unoccupied, but the second floor will be has a tenant prepared for it. They're proposing 18,327 square feet of landscaping. The minimum requirement for the zoning district is 15%, and this applicant is exceeding that requirement at a 31% proposal. So the building is located along the Skyway frontage, which staff was in support of. It provides a greater presence on the street with parking in the rear. They're proposing a decorative fence that goes to the edge of the building and around the property. And there's currently reciprocal parking between this property and Santa Maria Times. So they have a gate that will that's proposed between the two parking lots. And both tenants will be able to access both sides of the parking lot. As I mentioned earlier, the first floor is currently unoccupied. This is the floor plan for that, but it's ready for office use. And the second floor is laid out for the tenant, and it has a deck that overlooks the Hagerman Sports Complex. It's more of they're proposing a more contemporary modern architecture. They're using metal, plaster, and glass, and they're designed with a lot of articulation along the frontage. And this is what the site looks like currently. It's a vacant location. This is part of the reciprocal parking lot between Santa Maria Times and this office building. This is the north view. This is looking west towards Santa Maria Times. This one is looking east towards the Hagerman softball complex. And this is looking south towards Skyway Drive. Before I read the staff's recommendation, the applicant did contact staff and wanted to request some revisions to the permit conditions. So I just wanted to read those conditions for the record. The first, I provided copies of the revised permit for the commissioners, and there are a few copies in the back for the public to read. The first condition that the applicant wanted to change is number 7 regarding the landscape walls. It currently reads retaining wall. There will be no retaining walls along the Skyway Drive frontage. But we were able to work with the applicant and change the language to state that landscape walls along the Skyway Drive frontage shall be less than 3 feet above grade not impact the root zones of the existing trees, and be located outside of the public utility and tree easement area. And this was a discussion between the applicant, the planning staff, and Public Works and Rec and Parks. The second condition that they wanted to revise is number 14, which is for surface drainage. I'll just read the entire condition. It says, surface drainage shall run to any of the following or combination thereof, any alley, public drainage way, or to one or more sumps upon the property, and then drain through pipes under the sidewalk to the public right-of-way in accordance with the specifications of the Public Works Department. A grading plan shall be submitted to and approved by the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of the building permit. On-site drainage retardation areas shall be installed if required by the Public Works Department. These areas shall be landscaped and shall be shown on the landscape plan. Not more than 50% of the landscape area along the street frontage shall be used for a drainage retardation basin unless the basin is less than 1 foot in depth per City of Santa Maria Municipal Code 12-44.04 M1. Maximum slope of retardation areas shall be 4:1. So the change is just what's underlined. The applicant pointed out that our original condition didn't accurately reflect the municipal code, so we just wanted to clarify that. The third condition that we revised is the tree planting, number 15. What we changed is underline the 15-gallon size. So the condition now reads, the project shall provide the trees depicted on the landscape plan. The tree species selected shall be subject to planning staff approval. Trees shall be a minimum of 15-gallon size, as opposed to the previously requested 24-inch box size.
How does that equate? 15 gallons equals what as far as from a 24 to a what?
I'll defer to...
No, we'll have to ask the applicant on, this was a request of the applicant to amend the size of the tree, so I would defer to them to provide a description of that size. I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay.
So the fourth condition is regarding our fire hydrants. Again, the changes are underlined. Just to read it for the record, the condition now reads, on-site hydrants are required when any portion of the facility or building to be protected is in excess of 150 feet from a water supply in a public street, as measured by an approved route around the exterior of the facility or building. On-site fire hydrants shall be a minimum of 50 feet from any building if feasible. One on-site fire hydrant shall be required for this project. The on-site fire hydrant shall be located at the northeast portion of the property and shall be equipped with one 4.5-inch outlet and two 2.5-inch outlets. The on-site fire hydrant shall be placed so as not to be obstructed by parked vehicles or other materials that may impede access by the fire department. The fire hydrant shall be protected from impact in accordance with City of Santa Maria Public Works standards and Santa Maria Fire Department development guidelines. If an on-site fire hydrant is not installed, then the project gates between the project and western property shall be removed. So the main addition is the last sentence. This was the project gates between the project and western property is referring to the gate that is between the reciprocal parking lot between Santa Maria Times and this project. And the last condition that we revised is number 60. It's regarding the proposed driveway. So we struck through the first sentence, which states that the proposed driveway is unacceptable per the conceptual site plan dated August 15th, 2017. So we struck that out, and now the condition just reads, one driveway on Skyway Drive is permitted. The driveway shall be an at-grade drive approach without handicap ramp and shall have a minimum throat width of 30 feet and minimum curb return radius of 20 feet. The driveway approach shown in the conceptual site plan dated August 15, 2017 is within 5 feet of an existing fire hydrant. Nearest edge of driveway shall be located a minimum of 5 feet from any above ground utility, such as street lights or fire hydrants, and 10 feet from any street trees. I think, so the main change here is there is an error in the condition as it was originally written. Instead of saying that a handicap ramp is required, it now says it's not necessary. I think the applicant might have some comments on this condition, though. We're still discussing this. So those were the main conditions that we changed. That concludes staff's presentation of this project. Our recommendation is that the Planning Commission by motion approves this permit, PD 2017-0013.
Thank you very much.
Can I add one point on that condition? I just wanted to point out that the applicant disagrees with this condition and is recommending a smaller driveway approach, and we've consulted with engineering, and staff recommends leaving the condition as written.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much. Any questions of staff at this time?
Yes, for the driveway condition, how will it affect it to be without a handicap ramp?
Chair and Commissioners, there is no sidewalk requirement along that portion of Skyway per our existing municipal code, so we do not install handicap ramps where there is not sidewalk.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hallie, I had a question. Is there a deceleration lane on Skyway as you're speeding down Skyway?
Not for this project. One of the conditions and things that we discussed originally coming out of the study session was that the applicant needed to do a mini access study to determine if a deceleration lane would be necessary to enter into the parking lot. It is not something that you currently find on many of the driveways along Skyway. We do get suggestions that they would have been a good idea to put in. However, the applicant did complete the request and did contact ATE, and ATE provided an access study that's saying if the driveway is correctly sized, then it wouldn't need a deceleration or right turn pocket into the project specifically.
Thank you.
Further questions? I have one of staff on item number 15, the tree planting. Our norm is 24 inch, and so what was it that changed staff's opinion from the 24 inch to the 15 gallon? Hi, Netta.
Currently, our landscape standards in Chapter 12-44 only require that the tree planting size be 15 gallon. There was negotiations and discussions with previous plan development permits and other projects we've done where we have negotiated for larger size box trees for a variety of reasons. However, the applicant does not want to do the larger box size trees for the on-site trees for this project and wants to stay with the municipal code requirement of 15 gallon.
Okay. All right, any other further questions? All right. Can we hear from the applicant? Gil, how are you? Please state your name and address.
Gil Palacios, 2353 South Broadway. First, I wanted to compliment the staff, and I really enjoy the newest member of the planning staff. Lauren's been great to work with. We have had a series of modifications. They did seem longer than I think they really are. They were pretty minor. The only one that we have issue with is, as was mentioned, the width of the driveway entrance. We had previously shown a city standard 24 with a 15-foot radius return. And then in the process, we decided, well, hey, let's make this as big as we can make it and still, function reasonably on site. In doing so, we made it too large. We're starting to interfere with some of the other site constraints. So the request was to make it slightly smaller by a couple of feet in order to miss some of the existing site utilities that are on the site that would, kind of snowball into a much greater item. So, we're not asking to, shrink it down too small. We did have ATE review the site and provide the study, and that was based on, I believe, the smaller entrance. Other sites, other projects along Skyway Drive, some of them have curb cut returns, just standard, like a residential street entrance. which seem to function adequately as well. This does have at-grade radius returns, which make entering and exiting the site far, far easier. And again, we're talking about a couple of feet to significantly reduce the site, utility and alteration and cost.
Can you specify what the footage is you're looking for?
Like 2 feet.
So
it'd be-
28 instead of 30?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And I in my correspondence with the city, I try to give myself a little wiggle room, said 27 to 28, but I think 2 feet will do it. And I think if we just have some flexibility that we can work with them and we can come to an agreement.
And then the traffic study that you had commissioned was based on 28 feet?
24 feet.
24 feet, okay.
Questions of the applicant? No? Can you address the tree issue that I've brought up a couple of times? I mean, what is the size difference we're looking at, and why? You seem, on this project and other projects, you've seemed kind of reticent against the larger size. I'm just kind of curious what the thinking is there.
Well, it's two things. It's one, the size isn't that significantly different from a 24-inch box to a 15-gallon. And there have been studies done that actually show that in certain variety and most varieties, the trees do better in a 15-gallon than in a couple of years they're of comparable size. So there's not a real huge benefit in, it's a little different if you have a special location where you're trying to do a specimen tree, where you want a bigger tree initially, or one that's subject to, vandalism or harsh use, like in a shopping center where a lot of public and people might step over things or kids might play on them, then you might want a little bigger one. But in a private area that you're going to be there and you're going to take care of it, the other trees are perfectly acceptable.
Okay.
I used to serve on a board in the county, and the county landscapers and their in-house people, that's where that information comes from.
Right. I would say, though, that there may be studies that say that, but I know that our own arborist, and I know that staff has had a different opinion of that and has a different opinion on how the growth pattern goes. So under normal circumstances, I would probably dig my heels in a little bit more of this, but you're already putting in 31% of landscaping, and I think that should be commended. So anyway, that's just my opinion on it.
Well, as I'm looking at the site plan, I'm just a little concerned about the landscaping that's on the frontage, that's right on Skyway. I'm thinking that the 24-inch box tree to start off will kind of create that tree-lined street that we're looking for better than the 15-gallon, but maybe you have a different argument.
The trees that are shown on the site plan are currently existing.
Oh, okay.
So, and there has been some discussion because they're Canary Island pines are not my particular favorite.
Mm-hmm.
They can be a little messy, and so I did have some initial discussions with the city arborist and city staff about potentially replacing them. If those were to be replaced, and that we do have one new one that's scheduled to go in, that we are proposing to be at 24.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Further questions, comments? No, thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate it. Are there any written communications or public comments? No? All right. Then I will go ahead and bring that back to the commission, and any comments that the commissioners want to make about the project. Otherwise, we need a motion.
Can I just ask, what's the issue with the 30 feet of driveway versus 28? Yeah.
Chair and Commission, I will have to go back and double check the study. I did not bring that with me this evening. One of the big issues is, I'm sure as we're all driving down Skyway 20, when we were originally discussing, it was a 24 to 30. And if we narrow it down to a 24, that's like 2 cars parked next to each other. So if someone's coming out and trying to come in, I'm sure we've all had those experiences coming off Skyway where we almost have to make a complete stop and then turn in to make sure, because if the car exiting's any little bit over, then it kind of causes that little pinch point. And that's kind of why I would like to hold the driveway out a little bit wider so that we have a little more flexibility for larger vehicles to turn in and have an opportunity for a car to be exiting in the same location and not cause a conflict. The same type of thing with the curb return. If the tighter the curb return, the more you have to slow down to navigate it to get in. And he's done a really nice design where the parking is set back a little farther so a car has an opportunity to come in and kind of evaluate where it is before there are any parking movements. And that's why I also would like to hold the wider and curb radius, is that it creates an ease of getting into and out of the parking lot.
And would you be satisfied with the 28? 24 I can see being a little tight, but 28 is 2 feet less.
I don't know if they'd still clear the utilities with 28 because the site plan currently shows the fire hydrant within the curb return, and it's hard to scale off of a 11 by 17 size, but that fire hydrant needs to be about 5 feet out from the start of that curb return because that's where they always get knocked.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that that fire hydrant has a 5-foot clear zone before that turning movement begins. And that's where we're looking at, if it gets narrowed down to move it out of that, it looks like it'd be closer to a 24. The driveway does have room to scoot further north. It can be readjusted, but I would prefer to keep the extra width and the wider curb radius.
All right.
Can I just add?
Gil.
I'm willing to work with Public Works on that and have some flexibility because I really think having a steadfast must be this or we have to come back to commission. If we had some flexibility I think it's really between those two numbers, and obviously we'd like to make it as big as we can as well, but also don't want to incur tens of thousands of dollars of extra cost for.
But you see the concern being
Oh,
the speed of Skyway and people trying to enter your property and not wanting to clip various
There
things or
is
cause
speed.
issues.
We also have, we're very close to the stoplight.
Yeah.
So, there's acceleration, deceleration. The at-grade radius returns make a huge difference because it takes the throat of the entrance and it really widens it out and makes it much, much larger and much easier to get in. So, the minimum is 15. If it's between 20 and 15 and we can accommodate all that, I think we'll be doing pretty good. If we can just have that little bit of flexibility with Public Works, we'd appreciate it.
Okay. Further questions of staff or comments? I guess I have a comment. I would not be comfortable going down to 24 feet. If there's a 2-foot, if we're talking about a 2-foot fudge factor there between 30 and 28, I think that the two of you should work that out, and I would be fine with that. But cutting this thing down by 6 feet, I think, given the fire hydrant, given the speed of Skyway, I just don't want to see any accidents, be it between vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to fire hydrant. So, once again, if the 2 feet makes a huge difference to you as far as things go, then you can work that with staff. But for me, I would rather see it at 30, but if 2 feet makes a difference for you, but 6 feet is a bridge too far for me. So,
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Dickerson that people fly through Skyway. They're going 65 at times. And so I think that as a safety precaution, we need to keep that in mind.
I agree. I didn't get a chance to get over there just due to my, limited mobility.
Infirmary.
But just in my memory of the businesses that I've been to on that stretch of Skyway, a lot of them you enter from a side street. They don't have driveways coming off of Skyway. So I'm thinking that the entering from Skyway when people are going 65 is, the wider the driveway, the better. Okay.
All right. Additional comments?
Yeah, I agree with you also, Chairman. And I do like the architecture. I think it's going to be a nice addition to the Skyway corridor. Good job on architecture.
All right. With that, we will need a motion.
Can we add just clarifying language in that condition 60 to provide direction to Public Works to say, basically the end would read, shall have a minimum throat width of 30 feet, but no less than 28 feet, and a minimum, so that it's clear in the condition and it allows that flexibility between 28 and 30 feet. And it's written in here as approved by your commission.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. So 30 feet, no less than 28 feet.
And a minimum
Okay.
curb return radius of 20 feet. And maybe even add as approved by Public Works.
All right.
I'm going to defer to Public Works to respond to that.
Because as it's shown on the plan, if I'm reading it correctly, you've got 18 feet on the south side and 17.6 on the north side, your radius. Is that what, am I reading that right?
Hallie
Hallie is
confirms.
saying yes. So
Okay.
if that's what it says now and that's
Hallie?
working, I guess we can keep it that way, right?
I would still prefer to see it slightly larger. It's an unequal balance that's going on there, and once again, it's a curb radius that's been fit in order to miss utilities. It's not necessarily based on driver user expectation.
Okay.
I would prefer to just keep it at the 20 feet. I mean, if that's what staff is saying as far as the safety for the thing.
And then as far as moving the drive-fit because I understand moving the utility box, I mean, that's obviously a huge thing. If moving the driveway is easier, is he allowed to remove a tree to make that possible? Or is that?
It would have to be replaced. Any of the tree removal along Skyway is allowed, but there's a replacement ratio on site.
Sure, but I mean, he
couldn't be
could
accomplished.
create more driveway space if he took
Yes.
out a tree.
Okay.
He has a comment.
One last time. You can't be going back and forth, Gil.
I just wanted to point out the driveway lines up with the driveway that exists within the site. Sorry, I'm losing my voice again. So that's the reason why it's not pushed over more, and it just allows for better, easier access than offsetting or doglegging, which, obviously we could miss. We could make the driveway huge, but then it's no longer going to align, and they're, getting people in and through the site. So the flexibility of the radius return and the throat width and I don't know what that dimension really is. I would like to study that and work that through with Public Works to say this is an adequate, good, reasonable solution. So just allowing flexibility would be ideal.
What type of flexibility would be reasonable, Hallie, in your estimation? If we were to be a give and take type of
If we were to
community?
be give and take, I wish I had thought to bring the standards to give you some idea, I believe, of radiuses in other areas. 15 feet is the minimum. It's considered for a standard driveway approach. We go all the way up to a minimum of 27 feet in industrial areas for those curb radius returns. So it's kind of when you're coming off Skyway at that high rate of speed, when you're thinking about, industrial uses, high rate of speed, roadways. Oh, and Lauren has it because I emailed it to her.
Nice.
Oh, she is a good planner.
On a primary arterial where a street meets another street, where people are making right-hand turns, that kind of thing, the minimum radius is 35 feet. On a local street or a minor street, it's 27. So to give you some kind of idea where that fits in, the 15 feet is the smallest we allow on a driveway approach. And coming off of a road of that speed, I think we would want to compare it to something like a local or a minor street, because that's really the speeds you're coming off at. So I was thinking that 20 was actually kind of on the
It's already on the
more
short
reduced
side?
end
I see.
of it, just given the speeds on Skyway. So I can pass this around if you
Okay.
need help.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I think we need to keep traffic safety in mind first and foremost. So I think we need to defer to staff recommendations and best practices.
Further comments? No?
I would agree with Commissioner O'Neill, White O'Neill.
And I also agree. I think this particular one, we should just, if it's already been cut down to being a little on the small side, we don't want to cut it down further. So I would want to stick to the 20-foot as well. Okay, we need a motion, one way or the other.
I move that we approve Plan Development Permit PD 2017-0013 with the changes and amendments as read aloud, confirming that Section 60 regarding the driveway have a variance of 28 to 30 feet, but with curb return radiuses of 20 feet.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Gil. Okay, item number 5, general plan land use map and zoning map amendment for Luis Chavez at 1111 West Cook Street. Demands up.
Good evening, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Again, Ms. Gossing, the planner. Again, the project before you is a general plan land use map zoning amendment for 0.2 acre site. The property is located at 111 West Cook Street. Oh, thank you. The property is currently zoned CM, Commercial Manufacturing District. There is currently a single-family house at the front of the property. The backside of the property is vacant. The applicant, Mr. Luis Chavez, wants to construct a duplex on the rear portion of the property. In order to add a residential addition, a duplex, the property has to be rezoned to a residential zoning district. So therefore, the applicant is proposing the R3 high-density residential zoning district to allow that duplex addition on the property. Again, you can see the property, the vicinity context at West Cook Street. It's kind of a mixed bag of land uses. It's part of original Santa Maria, the old 4 square mile portion of the city. The area was subdivided in the 1800s. And over the years, again, there's been a kind of a mixture of uses in the vicinity. You can see generally to the west side of the property and generally kind of northwesterly, there's a mixture, across an alley, there's a mixture of industrial buildings. Directly west, there's a couple of single-family houses. Generally on the east side, there's mostly residential. That's conceptually, that's a preliminary site plan, just shows what the applicant has in mind. Assuming the rezoning is approved to the R3 district, the R3 district would allow the duplex addition with a building permit through building permit review and approval. So in theory, that's the existing house in the front, and conceptually the duplex in the back. Again, the project would be submitted for a building permit review and approval, and that's when the details would be worked out. And again, for the most part, the analysis literally is the appropriateness of the R3 district. And again, this would be the proposal, a land use change to the high-density residential land use designation, and the corresponding R3 zoning. And as you can see, generally to that westerly area, the existing CM commercial manufacturing, and again to the east is the already the R3 residential zoning district. So for a couple of reasons, the proposed R3 zoning would be consistent and compatible with the prevailing use in the area. Again, the prevailing and predominant use is residential, especially to the east, and obviously the zoning adjacent to the east is residential. So for those reasons, the proposed rezoning is logical and appropriate. So there was a negative declaration, as with all land use and zone changes, there was a negative declaration that was circulated, and that would be the environmental documentation for the project. With that, staff would recommend that the Planning Commission by resolution adopt that negative declaration, and by resolution recommend that the City Council approve a general plan land use map amendment and zone change, GPZ 2017-0002. So that would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Any questions for staff at this time?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Mr. Scott, that's parking, right? On one of the other slides? So they've got 2 parking spaces for this, off-street?
The project site itself?
The site, yeah, the site plan? Right there. So by the alley, the parking is by the alley, and the
Correct.
blue is all the concrete?
Correct.
So there's plenty of parking?
That's correct. That's a pretty typical configuration when you have the alley back there. Pretty common. That is absolutely correct, yes.
Do they have a garage? Is that a garage in there?
This is all we've seen so far as a conceptual site plan, but they would have to, the code would require 2 parking spaces per unit, 1 covered, 1 uncovered. So there'd have to be some covered parking. So again, all we've seen is a conceptual site plan, but there would be the municipal code required parking.
Thank you.
Further questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill, Area 9 was the area that was supposed to take the bulk of our commercial manufacturing areas. Is that still the majority of that area? Is it still commercial manufacturing, or is it kind of morphed into commercial and residential out there?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Lopez. That's kind of a policy question. That's a big picture question. And a lot's going on in Area 9. And I think that's something we're going to step back and look at for several reasons. As you know, Winsett Farms is taking up probably a substantial portion of Area 9. And I think ultimately there will be some reassessment of Area 9 for a lot of reasons. Also, there's still the airport-specific plan that hopefully at some point would get developed with industrial as well. So again, a lot of that big picture, those big picture issues will be kind of addressed in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
And I just had a question about the definition of R3. So R3 zoning can be single family or more than single family. So rezoning this parcel, the front house could be taken down, and a big apartment building could go there instead of what he's planning. It's all just conceptual now.
Absolutely true. It's all conceptual. The R3 district does kind of overlap the single-family zone. You can have a single-family house, a 2-family unit, or dwelling groups, typically up to 3, or possibly more with a use permit. But absolutely, yes, that's true.
And you may not be able to answer this question, but what if we rezone this to R3 and then an actual multi-family apartment building comes before us as the project? Will that parcel support that?
An apartment would not come before you because there is no PD overlay, and the R3 zoning in this particular case is consistent with the zoning in the area. In this particular area and on these smaller lots, we just applied the R3 district without the PD overlay. So any project would be approved at the zoning administrator level through the ministerial, typically. Okay. Most projects would just simply be a building permit. However, dwelling groups could potentially be a conditional use, meaning a zoning administrator use permit would be required. So again, these smaller projects under this zoning district would be would not come to the Planning Commission.
Okay, great.
I have a quick question for you, Scott. I'm kind of going off of what Commissioner Lopez was talking about. In Area 9, I don't know if this is a big picture question or not, but do you have a sense of what type of inventory we have of CM? Because in the past, we've had things that have come before us, and we've turned down projects of a similar nature and shifting. And ultimately, what it comes down to is, it's very easy to it's substantially easier to create residential than it is to create commercial manufacturing. And once you lose commercial manufacturing, it's hell getting it back. So I'm always kind of a little leery of this kind of creep that takes place.
Chair Dickerson, excellent question, good point. I think we do keep those kinds of tallies. Our general plan team does have an inventory. Don't know what that inventory, what it is at this point, off the top of my head, something that could be provided. Absolutely excellent point. And that was actually part of our analysis. We do consider that. It's noted in the staff report, in fact, that we did consider the balance, the importance of the industrial land and the jobs it generates. But in this particular case, we just believe, again, given the prevailing use, the surrounding uses, the current use of the property, it's just best appropriate in this particular case for the R3 high-density residential. Again, for a couple of reasons. Compatibility, and again, as we noted in the staff report, if we applied a CM, the typical CM project at this site, in this small site, it would probably be an auto repair shop. There's a pest control center to the north, and would that be appropriate for this location? And we believe, again, the residential in this particular case is most appropriate.
So when you're putting these considerations forward, I mean, I don't want to bind you too much on this, but part of it was the fact that there was already a residential building on there, and so it seemed like it could easily transition from the other R3s. If somebody came along, let's say in that northern, oops,
Trying to get
that north.
I was going to get the aerial if I could. Yeah.
Well, that's right. Go back to the one where we were. That northern area.
Sorry. Okay.
Where there's R3 as well. And if there were not residential on it, can we go back to the? There, that's the one.
I'm sorry.
So if we go into that northern R3 area that has kind of looks like 2 blocks of it, if there was just commercial next to it to the west, and somebody came forward and wanted to start creating residential, I mean, would that be appropriate? Or at that point you would say, no, we've drawn the line that we're going to have to continue with it as being CM? Yeah, something like that. That is a hypothetical.
Now, again, the existing use, there's an apartment on this particular property.
Well, if there was a commercial, I mean, I'm just trying to see where we draw the line.
Yeah, we would analyze that, in particular on that particular case. Again, we might still look at the surroundings. We might look at this particular property and see what the fit would be in the proposed uses. So, no, absolutely true. It's a tough analysis that we don't take lightly. We take it very seriously, and we did weigh it with a lot of consideration. So it's really kind of hard to tell hypothetically. We'd probably have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. And again, generally, and again, I speak in general terms, again, general plan, but generally the industrial uses are better on combined or bigger lots. Remember, CM uses generally involve trucks, those kinds of things. So you would be introducing truck traffic, usually for most of those uses, on those properties. So there's just a lot of case-by-case considerations. But you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, my concern is that we end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy. With each one of these R3s that we transition over, it makes a stronger and stronger case for the next one. And so the next one ends up, and then pretty soon we just start eating away at the CM to the point where we don't have it.
Your point is well taken. One other point, I think there is a comprehensive general plan update on the horizon, and I think that's going to step back and look at all these issues comprehensively.
Okay.
And I think that's going to be our big opportunity to carefully reassess all these kinds of these issues.
Yeah.
So point taken, and you're absolutely correct. And I think that general plan update is really going to be the place we look at those kinds of things.
All right. Further questions? No? Okay. Can we hear from the applicant? Have we heard from the applicant? Or not? That's fine too. Any further questions by the commission? No? Any written communications or public comments? Nancy? No? I don't want to skip you like I did last time. All right. All right, then we will bring it back to the commission and for whatever comments and or motions they want to make. If we do a resolution, the next resolution number is 2739. Or not.
Go ahead.
Looking at it, it is compatible with what is already occurring on the lots, but I do see the point that Chair Dickerson is making. However, I think this project, it's appropriate, so I am in agreement.
Yeah, I agree with the staff report that the parcel's really too small to do much of any important light commercial work. It's not going to generate, nothing would go there that would generate big jobs or generate much industry. And I think housing would be a much better use of the parcel.
I'm in agreement. I've driven by that neighborhood quite a few times. I don't think this is going to be an impact taken away from the CM zoning. It seems like a good use for the property, especially with the next item that we have coming up. Everybody's scrambling for more housing. So I tend to agree with staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it does seem compatible with the area. I'm just concerned with losing the CM zoning areas. And, you know, the general plan zone changes aren't something that we should take lightly. I'm a little disappointed that the applicant isn't here, especially for something this important. But it does fit the character of what's existing. Better fit, and sometimes in the 4 square mile area, you have these non-compatible uses, and this might be a way to clean up some of those areas. But again, you know, it's very important that we look at the general plan and zone changes very carefully, and I'm glad staff did a great job of looking at it and bringing up, you know, some of the analysis that you folks did. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
I agree with the other commissioners as well. I think in this particular case, it's appropriate. I think staff did a good job of taking a look at all the dynamics of that particular site. My concerns are more of a big picture item and for things down the road, you know, to really eyeball things carefully. But in this particular case, yeah, it seems like a good fit for what needs to be done. So.
Okay.
Well, folks.
I move that by resolution number 2739, we recommend that the City Council adopt a negative declaration.
I'll second.
Okay, can I get a roll call?
Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner White O'Neill.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez.
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Seifert.
Aye.
Chair Dickerson.
Aye.
I move that by resolution 2740, recommend that the City Council approve a general plan, land use map, and zoning map amendment GPZ 2017-0002.
I'll second.
Can we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner White O'Neill.
Aye.
Commissioner Seifert.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez. Chair Dickerson.
Aye. Wherever you are out there, congratulations.
Good luck.
All right, moving on to item number 6, zoning text amendment for accessory dwelling units, Title 12 of the City of Santa Maria Municipal Code. Can we hear from staff?
Good evening, members of the commission and members of the public. My name is Ryan Hostetter. I'm the planning manager for the city, and I will be making this presentation this evening for you. A little bit of this is going to be a refresher for you. I'll go over what we're going to talk about and get to our recommendation for you Essentially, we're going to talk about the process thus far on this project, the state law that's requiring this, main local concerns that we've heard, and go over our draft ordinance language and follow up with our recommendation and any questions you may have. So this might be a little bit of a refresher for folks. Here we did conduct a study session about the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. It went to Planning Commission study session August 17th. Staff also conducted an outreach meeting at city offices early September. And the City Council has adopted an urgency ordinance with a temporary moratorium until such time the ordinance came before them. And so the goal is that the ordinance go to the council before the end of the year. So a little overview on why we're here. Essentially, California, as we all been hearing, is under a housing crisis. The housing units proposed to be, we're about 180,000 units per year under what the state projects that we should be at. So the state has even looked at over 113 bills, I think, this last legislative session on housing alone. So it's a big topic, and accessory dwelling units are just one of the tools that addresses the housing crisis. It doesn't solve it, but it provides an additional tool to help provide an opportunity for a different type of housing. So because of that, state legislation has been enacted, and you'll see up on the screen there have been several bills that have gone through and are adopted, and those have been in effect beginning January of this year. And again, the goal of all of this is to provide affordable housing and housing choice. The state law has some key points that I will just update everyone on, and those include basically ministerial or building permit approval for an accessory dwelling unit on properties that are zone residential and have an existing home. It requires that they be limited up to 1,200 square feet. No additional parking is required, especially for those that are interior to an existing unit. One space can be required for a new ADU. New structures would comply with the current code, the current setback requirements. However, with existing structures that are proposed for conversion, the existing structure would be allowed to remain in place. No required setbacks no additional setbacks, could be required. In addition, no additional sewer or water connection fees could be required. However, the legislation leaves the door open for usage fees to pay for proportional use beyond the existing single-family home to capture usage fees on new ADUs. So there's a potential to allow for that. So some of the concerns that come up typically with these are essentially overcrowding and density and really changing the character of an existing residential neighborhood. Some of those items we'll talk about, we feel like we've added some language into the proposed code before you to help ameliorate some of those concerns. And additional concerns as well include traffic, sewer capacity, and just essentially overcrowding. So in an effort to address some of those concerns, the language in our ordinance, we were proposing that you consider requiring only one per lot. We require owner occupancy, and that's done through a covenant agreement. We require that if a conversion of a garage occurs, that parking be replaced to help with parking concerns. And also not requiring covered parking. So that's also a design issue as well. If you required covered parking, sometimes you'll see lots of carports going up, and that could detract from the character of a neighborhood. So we're not requiring covered parking, and parking could be allowed within the front setbacks, and tandem parking actually is allowed as well, and that's in the state law. So those are some additional parameters you'll see that are outlined in your packet, in your staff report, and then the language. So essentially, this is where we are. We're recommending that the Planning Commission recommend the City Council adopt an ordinance and adopt the text amendment 2017-0004, and we're available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Questions of staff?
Yeah,
Kelly?
I just wanted to, I love the idea of making sure that the owner occupies some part of the property. And how are we guaranteeing that?
So it's essentially similar to what it's a deed restriction. So it would be recorded on title on the property, and if a property were to transfer, it runs with the land. So it's a recorded covenant against the property on title.
So if the owner sells the property, the new owner must be a resident
That's correct.
that can't rent out both the original property and the ADU.
Yes.
Okay. And we'll have a way to confirm that. I mean, if the tax bill is going to that residence, we assume the owner is living there.
We will not be, Chair Dickerson, members of the commission, we will not be actively looking for those things. We will be dealing with them as code enforcement matters
Okay.
on a complaint-only basis.
Okay.
Or if there's a reason to inquire, for instance, if perhaps there's a police incident and it turns out that both of them are being rented out and they report it to us, we may look into it,
Okay.
even though there's not a complaint. But well, we won't be overly proactive, which is consistent with our policy.
And do we have a fine structure in place for that?
Yeah, it'd be the standard code enforcement fine structure, fines up to, it'd be up to $1,000 a day.
A day.
For a violation.
Okay.
Which reminds me, yes, it's okay, because any violation of the zoning ordinance is a misdemeanor, and that's how we would determine the $1,000 a day. We don't need to add it to the ordinance. Just
Okay.
had a moment of like, uh-oh, did we include that? That's not something we missed. No, that's okay. We're good there. So
Okay.
the standard code enforcement apparatus will come into play
Okay.
if there's a need. We're hoping that people don't do that.
Okay. And I had another question.
Go ahead.
And then I just had a question in general about what constitutes parking. So I'm just not clear on what our definition of parking. So if is a driveway, does a driveway count? Does a long, like where Chair Dickerson and I live, we have long, skinny driveways. Could they be tandem? Does that all, like what is parking?
It all counts, absolutely.
Okay, so if I
Driveway
turn my
space.
garage into an ADU, my long driveway, I can tandem park 3 cars there and that counts?
It is allowed,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
If I could just add, the only time we have to allow parking in setbacks, except we're not going to allow it in the front yard setbacks where, or certain setbacks, right? Isn't that, well, we have a requirement that you have to have parking on paved surface.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. We have to, we only allow parking on paved surfaces, and we don't allow paving more than 50% of the front yard setback. So
Right, okay.
there wouldn't be probably a lot more parking going on in the front yard. It would have to be, the replacement parking would probably be like towards the back or the side yard setbacks.
Okay, and that means parking that you own, it's not street parking?
Well, street parking would be permitted. That's one reason why staff decided against the covered parking as a replacement parking for the garage. Is we don't want to encourage more off-street parking. We want to get as much on the property as possible, so we're trying to be as flexible as we can.
And then would that be something that you would come out and measure, like the space between driveway to driveway, and if 2 cars can fit there, that's considered 2 parking spaces, or how does
They would be
that?
showing that on their building permit plans where the parking would be located.
Okay.
And off-street parking does not count.
Right.
It has to be on-site. The only time they would apply, or they would be able to waive parking is if they meet certain findings that are in the state law, that if you're within so many feet of public transit,
Right.
there's actually, yes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that off-street parking could be used in lieu of the on-site parking. I just meant
Oh,
that
that's what
it's
that was my
inevitable
question.
that it will be
Okay.
used, and so that's why we're trying to encourage flexibility in the parking so that
Mm-hmm.
people actually use it.
But they do have to show
Yeah, initially-
on-site parking.
Yes. Initially, we were going to
okay.
not recommend tandem parking. We were going to try to insist that the parking be in the setback areas or the backyards,
Mm-hmm.
because tandem parking is inconvenient and would most likely result in people parking on the street, which
Right.
they're trying to avoid.
Right.
But the state law was amended in October that basically took that
Mm-hmm.
away from us, so we are allowing tandem parking.
So, Chair and members of the commission, I'll also add that in addition to having a paved surface, that we would expect that there would be minimum dimensions to accommodate a parking space. So, a 5-foot setback, wouldn't really work. There would be, you would actually need the ability to park your car and get out of your car.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And not everyone drives a micro mini, like it has to be a reasonable size. Yeah, okay.
Further questions? Yes.
Chairman, so you'd be able to park in a 10-foot setback? I mean, you still meet the requirements of the parking stall adjacent to a permanent structure. Is that accurate then?
Generally, the parking space is 10 by 20, so as long as there's a width of 10 feet and 20 feet in length on your property, it would count.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Seifert?
Thank you, Chair. Doesn't this AB 494 say that we can't require them to park on the property, that they're allowed to park off-site?
If I may, Commissioner Dickerson, members of the commission, Commissioner Seifert, we can't prevent them from parking off-site, but we can require one space per unit, except when certain findings are made, certain limited findings, like within a half mile of the transit center, we wouldn't be able to require the additional space. I think we would still require if an existing garage is converted, if it's 1 or 2 car garage, we would require the replacement parking on site for that. We are requiring one space for every ADU on site, and unless those findings can be made. Did I answer your question? Or did I miss
Are
it?
we abiding the law?
Yes, absolutely. That's permitted. It's discouraged in the law. The law does not require it, but the law allows us to pass a local ordinance where we can require that.
So it states it is also allows all configurations of off-street parking for replacement parking spaces, even if they are not allowed elsewhere in the jurisdiction. So that doesn't mean anything?
I'm sorry, I should look at the language that you're referring to.
Page 2. Staff
Paragraph
report.
before discussion.
The reasoning for that language is to allow for different parking configurations. If your code doesn't allow tandem in other areas of the city, this is saying you have to allow other configurations such as tandem. You have to allow parking in the setbacks. So that's what that was doing.
That was what I was talking about earlier. The original bill said that you could prohibit tandem parking if it wasn't allowed anywhere else in the city. And we don't allow it anywhere else in the city. That bill was passed in September, became effective, it says September 27th it was signed, but that's when you're talking about 2299, right?
AB 494.
494 and
Oh,
229.
October 8th. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong. It's been a long day for me. Yes, it was signed in October, correct. That's what that's referring to. You have to allow the tandem parking now.
What's tandem parking?
It's one right in front of the other, in line with each other.
Okay. Does the law state that the owner has to reside on the property?
No, our law does.
Okay, so I build a residence, an ADU on my property, and I rent it out, and I sell my house, or I have to move out of my house. Let's say I sell my house to a new renter, so if the new people that are going to buy it, they're buying my house as a renter, and there's a renter in the ADU currently, are we going to be evicting them? Are we going to send zoning to kick them out? Are we going to fine them $1,000 a day? How's that going to work?
All of the above. No, I'm
Wait,
kidding.
I didn't understand the question.
I'm kidding.
Say it again.
I'm not following your example. We're going to need to, before we take any action, we're going to need a reason to take action.
Are you asking if the new owner, say you purchase a property with an ADU and then you decide not to live there, you want to rent out the main house, then you would be in violation.
Yes.
You would need to live there. And you would be notified because that would be on title. So if you choose to purchase
But that's
the
not
property,
what the state law says, right? That's
No, you're-
something that
that's
we came
in
up
our
with?
code.
You're
That's
correct.
That's correct.
The state law currently is applicable in this, well, was applicable in the city until the city council passed the urgency ordinance suspending essentially state law for a brief period of time to allow us to complete this work. We did that because we want certain things that the state law does not permit or does not require. One of those things is the owner occupancy. That is allowed by state law. If a local jurisdiction adopts an ordinance that requires owner occupancy and other things, which we have done, we have drafted an ordinance that includes some of those things that the state law allows a local jurisdiction to adopt. We can, as long as it's adopted, we can enforce those things that are contrary to state law. But if we don't adopt an ordinance, then we have to enforce state law.
But state law doesn't say anything one way or the other about owner occupancy.
It would permit them both to be rented out.
But it doesn't say municipalities are forbidden from requiring owner
It
occupancy.
specifically says that we can require
Yeah, good.
owner
Okay.
occupancy.
Right.
Which is what we're primarily, that's the main reason for proposing this ordinance. Staff believes that that particular provision is pretty essential to maintaining the single-family character of single-family neighborhoods.
And then keeping with that topic, so right now, nobody's been given a permit to build an ADU. We're on a hiatus till we get this work done. So starting January 1, you have a line of people out the door wanting to do this. They all have to be occupying the property they're going to build on.
Correct.
So nobody can build a brand-new, single-family home and an ADU that nobody's living in. Unless they're going to live in it, unless they're going to live in it.
They can
have to
build
be,
it, they just can't rent it out.
Yeah, okay.
They can't rent out both units.
Okay.
They'll be able to rent one or the other out.
And the ordinance likely won't be in effect January 1st. It'll be, the council has to take action, and then there's a 30-day period.
It'll probably be mid-January, like January 18th or something like that.
Right. I was being
I
facetious.
understood.
but yeah.
I understood that. There will be a line waiting.
Mr. Seifert, did you have
I did.
follow-up
Thank
questions?
you.
Go ahead.
So staff, you guys think this is a good idea then, this owner occupied? It's not going to get us into trouble?
This is a tool to help provide oversight, essentially. So the owner, if there's issues with having multiple residential properties with ADUs build out, it requires that the owner have oversight over their property and what's going on the other unit. So the idea is that if both units were rented and the owner wasn't anywhere around, that there wouldn't necessarily be the same amount of ownership or oversight.
Mm-hmm. And that's something we're taking on as a city, saying that's what we want.
It's a recommendation.
Okay.
What are your concerns about it?
Hold on.
So limiting number of ADUs per property to one. So is this a requirement of the law?
The law requires cities to permit one ADU to any existing or proposed single-family dwelling in any residential zone. That's that's foundational. We have to allow that.
So if we had somebody that came in with a huge property, had plenty of parking, had plenty of space, we're still going to tell them 1,200 square foot ADU max.
Well, if they were zoned R2, they could build a duplex and comply with the R2 requirements.
So like what we just saw before
Yeah.
that, what we changed to R3.
Sure, in R3, they could build an apartment building.
So we're looking at that as a remedy.
That's multifamily housing. We're still going to be doing that. One thing our ordinance does provide that state law is sort of silent on is what would happen if somebody has an existing single-family lot on an R2 lot, goes forward and builds an ADU on it. We grant the permit because we're required to under state law and in our own ordinance. And then, because it's an R2 lot, comes forward with another plan to build like a single-family dwelling, and then want to add another ADU. We're not going to allow that. We feel that that's not consistent with the state law. We are going to require, if they want to add 3 units, essentially, to an R2, they all have to comply with the R2 requirements, which would be covered parking. Chun and Ryan can answer the details better, but that's one area where we identified in our staff level discussions of potential abuse that we wanted to avoid, so we addressed it in our ordinance. And we do believe it's consistent with state law.
Yeah, so this was... Okay. I'm a little concerned with $1,000 a day in the the zoning.
No. We would not necessarily automatically start charging $1,000 a day. Code enforcement has a protocol where we go out, we send out a warning notice, or we meet. It doesn't usually escalate right off the bat to $1,000. That's like a last resort when it starts. When we're not getting compliance, or we're getting resistance, and when people aren't doing what they need to do, the fines increase until it gets to a level that usually gets their attention. And we also have other options. If the money doesn't matter, if somebody's a billionaire and will pay us $1,000 a day and be happy to do it, we have other tools at our disposal, administrative penalties that could be much higher, or
I'm just worried that some renter's going to
require-
get kicked out of their property because an owner did something they weren't supposed to do.
That could happen, yes.
Yeah.
Now, again, we wouldn't be doing this unless there's a reason to. We're not going to be proactively looking to police this. This isn't what our code enforcement's goal is. It's a weighing and balancing. And of course, the council, you or the council can say, no, we think it's great that they're both rented out. We need all the housing we get. That's a perfectly justified point of view. It's just that staff is making a recommendation that we feel proper balance is to require owner occupancy, as a way for an owner to maintain the ability to keep the house, and afford the mortgage by getting some extra income, also providing some lower cost housing, but not turning essentially every R1 lot into an R2 lot.
Yeah, okay. That's a good
Chair,
description.
members of the commission, I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit in the staff report. There may be some issues that appear to be competing, one of which is the provision of affordable housing. The state, with this law, intends for cities to provide more affordable housing in response to the lack of affordable housing in the state. On the other hand, there is a desire to preserve the single-family characteristics of our existing single-family neighborhoods. And so the owner occupancy requirement that we're proposing, which is an option provided by the state, is a more conservative approach. And we anticipated that our residents may prefer to take the approach of wanting to keep the single-family characteristics. And so I think that's some of the thinking behind the recommendation. However, I think the commission is certainly welcome to weigh the issues and see if this is, a worthy recommendation.
Thanks. I have a few more questions. Chung, Director Chung, it says provide sufficient side and rear setbacks for fire safety. Is that your decision, what's sufficient? And also with the sewer, water, the calculations on that, I believe that falls under your jurisdiction also. Does that go right to you and you decide if these things meet the requirements for fixture units and sewer and water? It's kind of vague in here how that works.
As far as the development regulations are concerned, setbacks, things of that sort, the local jurisdiction can draft setbacks, but the local jurisdiction should not draft the regulations in a way that would inhibit or discourage the construction of ADUs. As far as the utility connections, can you be a little bit more specific?
Well, let's say I live in a 1,800 square foot, 3-bedroom home, and I want to put, a 900 square foot ADU on with a bathroom, kitchen. I'm adding fixture units, maybe a laundry, sink. So I'm adding all these fixture units to my existing sewer line. So on the ADU, we're trying to promote this. So somebody comes in and says, this is what I want to do. I've got an existing 3-inch line. I want to tie into it. Do we do that calculation and tell them you're over max on your sewer line, or your 3/4 inch meter doesn't work for the additional water uses? How do we handle those situations?
My understanding is that separate metering it's not required. It's optional.
Right.
However, the issue that you raise is certainly something that we've thought about, and it is concerning to us because we cannot fully anticipate the impacts.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to measure. Once this is adopted and in place, how many of these will be built? We don't know. It's hard to anticipate that. So it's a valid thought and concern.
So but that's going to be your department. You guys are going to figure that out. How
Public Works may have comments.
Okay.
May I chime in? Chair and Commission, if it's a private property, if it's a private sewer lateral, that is something that the building department checks on sizing as far as an additional property tying into an existing private sewer lateral. And water meter, same type of thing. If they want to upsize from like a 3/4 to a 1-inch, that is something that the design engineers need to provide calculations on. And then through the changes in the meter and the upsizing, that's how the additional ADU contributes, because now their water demands go up, so they pay their percentage based off of the increased water demand. And that's what's reflected in the state ordinance. So basically, if you use more water, you pay for more water.
Right. Are you saying that we're going to be requiring them to dig up their sewer and put in a bigger sewer and increase the size of their water meter?
If their design engineer recommends it. We do not tell the designers what they should and should not do. They need to provide flow capacity calculations that say our existing size is adequate. And that's where we stop the building plan checking. So if they've only got a 1-inch sewer line and they're adding a second unit basically the same size, and their calculations prove that they need to do it, then it's on their design engineer to make that recommendation and improvement. The city does not size their private equipment.
This could be a little sticky, though, don't you think, Director Chung? I mean, if we're going to be adding these fixture units and this water usage, the price of a water meter right now is very expensive. I think they start at $12,000 for a 3/4. So if you're upsizing, I think you're going up into the $20,000 range. Digging up your front yard, adding a sewer is quite expensive. So it's going to be up to your department to make sure that these residences can handle this. I mean, I'm just.
I'll defer back to Hal.
Okay.
What we do not require, we cannot require them to get another meter. So if they pull off their existing meter and their existing private water line and tie it into the ADU in the back or tie it into the garage, and they don't need to make any meter changes, no, they get no additional fees.
They don't need to or don't want to?
They don't need to. if their engineer who's designing the ADU says the water meter size we have is acceptable and we don't need to make any changes, that's on the design engineer applying for the permit. If they do, for some reason, feel that they would like to upsize their meter, say they do have an older neighborhood and they have one of the tiny 5/8 by 3/4 or something, they get credit at today's prices for the existing meter they have, and they only pay the differential. So it's not a whole new meter size. They get credit for the existing meter that's on the property. And once again, unless we see something significantly different or their design engineer makes a suggestion, we will not be requiring them to replace a meter. And hopefully their sewer line was sized when the house was designed to be able to handle a couple of extra fixtures. So once again, it's going to be, for private on-site improvements, it's going to be at the recommendation of the design engineer, unless during building plan checking we notice something is severely off. And then we'll actually reply, and our comment will be, please provide calculations that your water meter size and sewer capacity is acceptable. And that's the concept behind it, as far as private on-site improvements go.
Okay. Back to the fees. So we're going to be charging them growth mitigation fees, and that's acceptable. It says back here about the fees.
Yes, we will be.
And that goes with the law. There was something in here on the fees at the very beginning on the staff report.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it goes with the law because the law basically says that you can charge them, but it has to be proportional to the impact. In other words, ADU's fees must be less than like a single-family dwelling because the impact is less, right? Our ordinance is based on square footage, so if the smaller square footage is automatically going to have a lesser fee than a
So the same fee pay schedule will be in effect, but because the square footages are
Yes.
smaller, they'll be paying less, is what you're thinking.
Right, and to me, that means it's proportional. As a lawyer reading that means it's proportional. That's what the guidance was, that you can charge something, it just can't be as much as like a full-on new unit. And because it's based on square footage and the square footage is limited, that automatically it's going to be less of a fee.
And for further clarification, it's also new square footage. If you carve out an ADU out of existing square footage, the fees do not kick in.
Yes, okay. Parking, covered park required.
I had a question.
Hold on. Let
Oh,
Mr. Seifert finish.
I think that does it for me, thank you.
Given you've probably had a lot of calls and gotten a lot of people that are interested, do you have any sense of proportionally how many potential new ADUs are going to be new physical structures and how many are going to be carved out of existing homes? Has anybody indicated that? Have you had conversations enough to get a sense of that?
Chair and Commissioners, we've had about 10 building permits submitted and that we have started the review process on before the moratorium was placed on it. And it's about a 50-50-ish split right now.
Okay.
Some lots, some of the larger R1 lots are interested in putting a second unit on the back. I have a feeling that the garage conversion is going to become the more popular option just because of the ones that have come in are new construction wanting to include an ADU. So it's kind of, hey, look, we can do this. Let's pop it on the back. So I get the feeling that the garage conversion is going to take over once this gets started just because of the simplicity of the changes to the building itself.
Okay.
Further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I get some clarification? It's on the law. It says conversion of existing living space. So a developer can't come in and propose development with a single-family residence and an ADU right off the bat?
They can. They can. There's different ways of proposing ADUs, and both of those would be allowed.
Okay, so it's not just existing?
Right, no.
Okay. And then another question I had is, can a family member be considered owner-occupied? If the father leaves the home to the family, to the son or daughter, or the mother leaves it, is that still considered owner-occupied?
So very good question, Commissioner Lopez. I looked into that. The way the ordinance is written is the property owner is the person that has the majority share. And if ownership is held equally, then either person with an equal share is the majority owner. So if property is left to a family, or say a family of two people, two people, and they have 50-50 ownership, either one of them could live and meet the requirement. If it was given to 4 children, for example, and one of them lived, as long as they all had the same ownership requirement, one person could live and comply with the requirement.
And if a trust owns the property, same?
I'm sorry?
If a trust owns the property?
You know, that's an interesting question. If a trust owns the property, there's a trustor and a trustee. There's a person, usually. It's an interesting question. I hadn't thought if a corporation owns the house, how do you make them live there? That's something we hadn't really considered. I guess they wouldn't be allowed. I'm not sure. One of the frustrations that staff has had and my colleagues statewide is that this is kind of written and rushed through, and it's certainly not thought through. There's going to be a lot of things that come up that we can't possibly anticipate right now. We've tried the best we could through internal staff meetings to anticipate things, but that's a great example of some non-person owning property. How are we going to require a non-person to live on the property? I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you.
Mr. Seifert.
So that brings up an interesting point, Mr. Cinco. So I own my house. I want my daughter to stay there. I'm going to get out of town. I'm going to go do something, live somewhere else. She's my heir, but she doesn't own the home. She's my family. She wouldn't be able to legally, according to our law, manage that property for me because she doesn't have the ownership of the house if I have a renter in the back.
Well, if you're permanently vacating, you're moving, that's not going to remain your permanent domicile.
But it would be my, if it's
you
my
are-
family member that's there.
I understand. And again, we have to draw the line somewhere. If you're not opposed, if you don't like that, we're going to need to change it because that is a concern. I don't know how to water that down to cover those situations. I think they'd be rife with abuse pretty easily. A family member staying and then renting, that seems to me we shouldn't even bother in that case. But I would say that one person did contact our office, code enforcement case, and the person owns the house but doesn't live there, and his sister, who's, I don't know if she's severely disabled or has some mental condition, but she's pretty much a shut-in and lives there and will live there the rest of her life. They asked the question that you just asked. Under the ordinance, they want to rent the other one for income and allow his sister to live on the property, but he's going to continue to own it. And I suggested that he just deed half the house to her. And that would solve the problem. So I guess it's a question of what you want. If you don't like that property owner requirement because you think, wow, somebody's a family member or cousin or friend should be allowed to live there, it's my property, I should be able to do what I want, that's a perfectly valid point of view. Staff has made a recommendation that we believe that that's going to lead to more disastrous consequences than not. But certainly a valid point, and it's not a perfect solution to require the property owner to live there. But another problem with the state law is they give us very few options to control the property, and so that's one of the few things we have.
I'm not so concerned with the friends, but immediate family members. Is that something that we could look at I
suppose.
If I may, Commissioner Seifert, some jurisdictions, they expand the definition of ownership. Some, because you can ask, does ownership mean 365 days out of the year? Or is it 200 days? Is it 300 days, 180 days?
Right.
There are some jurisdictions that provide an expanded definition to talk about number of days out of the year or familial relationships. We didn't have that prepared, so the question you asked it's a valid question, but some cities do choose to address it in a certain manner.
Can we leave that on the table where that's something that we need to talk about or think about as far as immediate family members? Not friends, not cousins, not distant relatives, but immediate family, it might be something we'd want to look at.
You are providing a recommendation to the city council, so I suppose that the commission could provide direction to staff to provide additional language or clarification.
That's just a concern. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. If I may, I absolutely agree with Director Ning that we could make that a recommendation to the city council. And I mean, we can even toy with some language right now. But certainly, if you believe that we should expand the property ownership, that this would be the time to do that.
Wouldn't that have to be all?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you'd have to have 3 votes of the commission to change the proposed ordinance before you, but you certainly could do that.
I do have a comment about that. I think that we're asking for a lot of headaches and a lot of monitoring when you get into familial relationships and definition of that, because I can have a lot of family, but it could be a friend that is helping me if I become ill, or, I think that is something that Mr. Seifert has brought up, and I agree with him in that it is not something that the city would want to take on. And for that reason, I think we should, as for now, what we're looking at, delete that section. Now, in the future, if it does become a problem and those properties do cause issues, I think we can come back and amend. But right out of the gate, to have the ownership requirement, I think we're asking for trouble. And it's going to cost us, as a city, I think, more trouble than it's worth.
I totally disagree. I just think the ADU issue can potentially solve some problems, but I just see enormous abuse. I see enormous terrible treatment of tenants. I see a devolving of neighborhoods if owners are not a big part of the process and need to be on site, need to be caring who they rent to because they have to live with them, caring their sewer is going to be affected, their water usage, their water pressure is going to be affected by their tenant, so they want to build it the right way, do the right thing, because that's going to affect their own living experience. And if we allow, if we don't make this the owner-occupied amendment a priority, then I just see we'll have neighborhoods that are majority renters and not owners, and that's just going to completely change the character of neighborhoods for the worse.
I agree with Kelly on this. I think what the state has done is put everybody in a very difficult situation, and I agree with Mr. Seifert. There are a lot of things that you can take a look at this, and you need additional questions answered. But I think that to maintain our single-family neighborhoods as best we can, we have to put some restrictions and limits on this thing. And I think an owner-occupied element, I think, does that very well. Now, we could certainly ask the staff to come back, vote on this. If it goes through, it goes through. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But let's say if it went through, we could certainly ask staff, in addition, to work on cleanup, maybe talking about family members, maybe talking about corporations and trusts and things along that line, so then we can actually get that kind of hashed out as well. But I think it's a good start. I think owner-occupied is probably the best way of going. We have very little wiggle room, and this bill has been inflicted upon us. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, you can look at what the series of things in other communities that have been so obstinate about about allowing additional residential buildings to go in, and this is ultimately ended up causing this. It snowballed to the point where the legislature felt like they had to do something. I think it's probably heavy-handed, but they have. I think the problem that we run into, as with so many things in ordinances, is we're not really building this ordinance for 95% of the population. We're building it for the 5% that are unreasonable. And it's almost that way in almost any ordinance. It's at some point, somebody's going to, if we don't put an ordinance like this in, somebody's going to want to be squirrely and start doing rentals and all different types of things. And that's going to tremendously impact the single family neighborhoods that we have. It's going to completely change the characteristic of them. And so I think we have to do something to protect those. And I think that's what this is. And I go back to what Mr. Senko said. This is not something that that code enforcement is going out and beating the bushes over. They are only going to respond if they get a complaint. And so really the idea of whether or not somebody is owner occupied or not, it really starts at, is something egregious happening to the house next door to you? You've bought your home, you're raising your family, you're having, things are pleasant amongst your neighborhood, and then somebody builds an ADU and they start getting squirrely with the thing, and they are living right next to you. They are impacting and inflicting themselves upon you, and that's when a phone call is made. It's not because somebody built an ADU and they're quiet, they're nice, and everything's going along dandy. It's because something unpleasant is happening, and that's when code enforcement comes in. So I'm not worried about your home and your daughter, and you building an ADU and your daughter living in it and you moving away and this and that, because you're going to be reasonable people. It's the unreasonable people that we're really worrying about here. And if we don't build in something to assist neighborhoods to maintain themselves, then I think we are going to be very unhappy with things in the future. Further comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes,
I was
sir.
questioning where I was looking up the part where the property owner is defined as, an equal owner. I wasn't able to find it in the ordinance, and yet I was certain that it was in there. And I was thinking it might be in the definitions in the zoning ordinance, and I'm not finding it. So I want to correct myself. I don't believe that, I'm not sure where I saw that now. I thought it was in this ordinance, and I apologize for my error. But it's certainly something that I was prepared to interpret accordingly.
This is, the language is in the ordinance.
Okay,
It's
I couldn't find it. Help me.
125604. It's on page 7 of my staff report. General, it's 1C2.
Oh, yes, thank you. I knew I found it. This should be in red, because for some reason this
It's
looks
okay.
white to me. Okay, thank you. I did know that I read it. I couldn't find it where in that section. I just glanced right over it. But that is the section that we would be working with if we wanted some modifications to it. And I was thinking, like, for instance, Commissioner Seifert, I mean, if your daughter is your heir and you want to just put her on title as an equal owner, sooner rather than later, that would be one way to bring the property into compliance, or that you could allow your daughter to live in the house but then not rent the other unit. Someone could live there without renting it. That would be another way to fully comply. So, I mean, there would be workarounds, and agreeing with what Commissioner Dickerson, reaffirming that we would not be going out of our way to interfere with personal relations and living arrangements unless we had a reason to.
I know that, but on a previous, I think it was the Estrada Produce, we had the same topic, and Commissioner Maribel said that the law is a law, and if you're breaking the law, you're breaking the law, and that would be what these people are doing, whether they're being turned in or not, if I'm not mistaken.
True.
Yeah.
And we are restricting people's property rights. People hold title in different ways for different reasons, and financial reasons being one of them. And I think you're asking people to change ownership to meet the standard for this ordinance when it, like we're saying, we're dealing with the 5% that will take advantage of it, but the 95% of people want to do things right and want to be correct and not break the law. And I think that's where we run into trouble with the way it's written.
Well, but on the other hand, nobody's forcing anybody to build an ADU. If you can't comply, if you can't live in it and rent the other, then this isn't the right project for you. I mean, if you can't meet these standards, then don't build an ADU.
Right, but the whole point is to have affordable housing. So you're limiting the purpose of the state law to be able to do this. That's the intent.
But we are living within the state law. In other words, they give us wiggle room, and we're utilizing it to protect our neighborhoods. Yes, you may be limiting the person next door to you, but I would rather we limit people all the time. Mm-hmm. Our properties are constantly being limited, and I just don't want to see the person next door to that person have their property suddenly not be as nice, and their living not be as nice. We're not saying you can't have an ADU. We're just saying that you should have an owner who lives there, so then they can oversee it. There's nothing outside of the intent of the law by offering that caveat. Nothing, in my opinion. Further discussion? Okay, then, one way or another, we need a motion if we're going to move forward with this. With a resolution, it would be 2741.
I move that by resolution, we approve the city council zoning text amendment. Oh, no. Is it a zoning text amendment, or is it? Oh, no, I'm sorry, yeah.
Pardon me, Commissioner Wanaman, did we open a public hearing on this? Does anyone remember?
I apologize. Geez, we were up here so long, I thought we'd actually brought it back.
I don't think we ever got past the questions from the commission.
Kathleen, is there any written communication? Yes. That's right. And there are 400 people waiting outside to talk, each one. Is there any written communication or any notes? No. All right. Seeing no public comments, all right. I will now bring it back.
There is.
Is there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I've never heard anybody say now it's open.
No, that's all right. Normally there's a form you fill out, but that's all right. You can fill that out later. By all means, sir, come on up. State your name and your address, please. 3 minutes. 60. Give me 60.
Oops.
Is it broke or will it still work? Okay.
There you go.
My name is Gary Crabtree. My address is 1437 Ivory Drive in Orcutt. And I have a couple of questions and would like to address a few things. For over 40 years, I've been a real estate broker and land developer here in Santa Maria. And I'm in the process with the city at this time with 5 lots that my intention is to build 5 new single family and 5 ADUs on this property. I have one in right now that came back with 118 corrections. The corrections have been made and have gone back to the city. And one of the things that was said here about water meters, not requiring water meters because of the cost. Well, on my plans, when they've come back, that was one of the things that was told to me that I would have to have, that I would have to provide 2 separate 3/4 inch water meters for this property. And I have read the state law backwards and sideways, and I was glad to hear tonight that they're saying that we're not going to require it, but I'm the first person through the gauntlet. That is not what my plans came back as, and it's not what I was told that I would have to do. So I'm hoping maybe they've changed their mind, but that's not how my plans were sent back to me. And so I wanted to address, and you mentioned what is the percentage of what's going to be happening in the future. I don't like to address this from the fact that I'm old now, but that's where it's at. And over the years, I've had a lot of clientele that have had moms and dads, people that they're taking care of, that have wanted this and needed this. And there hasn't been any of it, especially in the city of Santa Maria. They didn't even allow granny flats of any kind. In the county, you had a little bit of leeway. And so there's a huge demand for this type, and that's the reason why I'm going that direction. I have 6 acres in Orchid that I'm subdividing into 4 units, 4 lots right now, and I plan on building 4 brand new 3,000 to 4,000 square foot homes and 4 1,200 square foot ADUs. So the demand is there, the people want it. You can argue all day long over having the restrictions, deed restrictions or not. Portland, Oregon doesn't have deed restrictions, and they do, and they are the biggest purveyor of ADUs. Santa Cruz, on the other hand, probably one of the bigger ones around here, they have it. And so, from my opinion, is that if this is about providing more housing, then the less restrictions you have, the more housing you will have. The more restrictions, the more costs that you put upon a developer, the less likely they're going to do this. So you have to take it into consideration. I try to put my head on this side of the mentality of not my neighborhood. I live in a nice neighborhood, and when this first all started coming down the pipe, I'm thinking, oh man, that's all we need. Now I'm going to have additional renters next to me. And so, but I was for it on the developer side. I'm going, oh, great, this is a good thing. And so you have to weigh the pros and the cons. And so if this is really about creating more housing in the state of California, which we've all said there's a huge shortage, then this is one way that can be efficiently handled that will provide not enough, but will supplement what we have and what we're in, the direction we're going in. And if it's done properly, it will be more cost effective to be able to give these second type of units. And I didn't know I have a certain time.
There you go.
Okay, then.
Go ahead and take an extra few seconds if you want to wrap it up. That's fine.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, there was a few things in the writing in this part that I had a little bit of concern with, but I didn't know I was 3 minutes time limit, or I would have just addressed those 3 items. On some of the specifics
Well, like I said, take an extra 30 seconds or so if you can.
Okay, well, on the one about you must have, for open space, a 15 by 15 usable private yard area. Well, is that within the building envelope, or is that on the lot itself? It doesn't specify. And if it's specifying it's got to be within the building envelope, that's going to be difficult to accomplish. If it's on the whole lot, then it will be a lot easier to be able to handle. So that is one concern that I had with what I saw, the verbiage on that part of it. And the other thing that, in the lot size, where it was talking about minimum lot sizes, I was concerned with the way that it was worded when I was reading it. I understood it to mean that it could be stipulated that there is a specific minimum lot size, but doesn't say what the minimum lot size is. So maybe I'm misreading that aspect.
Sure, we'll have you give your questions, and I'll have staff talk to you about each of them individually rather than hash things out here.
Okay, sorry I went over my time.
That's all right. Thank you very much. And once again, if somebody could answer his questions perhaps and get in touch with him, we'd appreciate it. Further communication from the public?
Are you prepared to answer his questions right now? Or should we address it after?
Can you just kick him out? That's fine. No, not kick the person out, kick the questions out. Are you able to answer them?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, well, then go ahead.
I appreciate Mr. Crabtree's comments. As far as the 15 by 15 open space, we can provide clarification that would be for the whole lot. This would be one of those development standards, but development standards should not be drafted in a way to discourage ADUs, because that would be inconsistent with the state's intent. So I think that the fair application would be that the 15 by 15 dimensioned open space be from the whole lot. As far as the minimum lot size is concerned, this is the ability to do ADUs is for all residential zones.
I think there's a minimum lot size for the zones,
The minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet in
Yeah.
the municipal code.
unless there's council finding of smaller lot than 6,000, or is that the smallest?
There is the RSL zone, residential small lot zone.
Yeah, I think the council might have done some 5,000 square foot lots for large subdivisions or something, maybe. But anyway, that's, Mr. Crabtree, that's referring to the city's overall standard of a minimum lot. Now, there's no specific minimum lot for this chapter.
I would like also speak on a comment that Mr. Crabtree brought up, is that this does accommodate for multi-generational households, and that there is some value to that. It is something that is a trend that meets some demographic needs.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, further questions? No? All right, I will bring it back to the City Council, or excuse me, the Planning Commission, and thank you very much. And eventually it'll make its way to the City Council.
You raised our level.
For God's sakes, I am sick and I am here at 20 minutes to 9, all right, so just cut me a break. Any further comments or questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a tough one. I understand the logic for an owner-occupied primary unit. And I know in the past, I think Mr. Crabtree noted that we have never allowed granny units here in the city of Santa Maria. Although there was one instance that, I don't know if it was a 24-hour period, that the city did allow granny units to be built over on Panther and Main Street, the big subdivision. Is that incorrect?
We don't call them granny units, we call them casitas.
Okay.
And they're not supposed to be rented out. That was never the intent of the owner, and they were intended to be guest rooms essentially, but yeah.
But there was that.
There was that pressure, wrong word. There was that desire on the part of the developer to have this as a marketing component. And there wasn't, the thing is, there's no kitchen in those. So,
right.
And there's the only accommodation we made is we allowed 3/4 bath as opposed to a half bath. But there was no right to put cooking facilities in there, so technically it was not a second unit, it's a casitas or an ensuite.
Yeah, and then, looking back and then looking at the non-owner occupied, there was an article in the Times within the last 2 weeks talking about homelessness in Santa Maria Bonita School District. And if our intent is really, truly to build more or have more housing stock, having it owner occupied, as Mr. Crabtree mentioned, you do limit the amount of people that could go into those homes. And I know that the Santa Maria, at least in the article, the Santa Maria Bonita School District defined homelessness as more than one family sharing a single family residence. In Santa Maria, we've probably had up to 3 families living in one single family residence. So if this is a tool to really increase our housing stock, or at least some affordability, then that's kind of it's a tough decision for me.
Can I just say, though, it's not either or. In other words, let's take this slow. Let's go with the owner occupied and see what we generate. Don't open the floodgates initially and have everybody in, and then find out we have a problem, and then try to rein it back in. A more moderate approach would be to try to protect those single the single-family neighborhoods. And whereas if we don't have owner-occupied, we've just opened the floodgates to anything and everything. There really isn't, I don't see there being any restrictions at that point. And once again, we're still going to end up with a lot more stock than we used to have. I mean, assuming people are building. So either way, you're going to end up with a lot more stock.
Yeah, I agree. I think this does solve a crisis problem, and it does it in a way that protects the tenants and the neighborhoods by ensuring that an owner lives there. Because the tenant will be taken care of, the tenant will have a responsive landlord, the neighborhood will be taken care of because the owner will ensure that the yard is maintained, that the house is painted because they live there. When you let everything become a rental, even with the best of intentions, rentals take a big hit in usage, and then there's less oversight on who the tenants end up being. Then you move in 2 and 3 families, which the structure isn't prepared for. So I think the owner-occupied, I think it just solves the problem. It creates housing. Hopefully they'll be affordable. We can't guarantee what the rents are going to be, but given that there's more stock, it's competition will keep prices down. But it'll create housing, it'll create quality housing and good places for families and tenants to live that'll be protected because their landlord is their neighbor and will see to it that the property's taken care of.
Commissioner Dickerson and members of the commission, one thing we didn't address is the issue of short-term rentals on Airbnb. That's something that we'll be probably talking about next year in a bigger way, but there's a concern about also not having an owner occupancy renting out an accessory dwelling unit is going to happen. We already know that, but it would seem logical to limit that to the situation where there's an owner occupant rather than having somebody rent out both units as essentially Airbnb units. So that's another reason why staff has supported the owner occupancy requirement or recommendation.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay. We either need a resolution or not, a motion.
What was the resolution number?
2741.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
May I ask a question? Are we going to vote on whether or not we include the owner occupancy as part of the resolution or not before we go to the main?
I think it's up to whoever pushes the resolution forward.
Without?
I'm going to make a motion that we approve resolution number 2741, adopting the accessory dwelling units as presented by staff.
Is there a second? I'll second it. We have a roll call, please.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Aye.
Chair Dickerson?
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez?
No, as it's written.
Commissioner Hernandez?
No.
Commissioner Seifert?
No.
Can I make a motion?
Absolutely.
I move that we approve by resolution number 2741, adopt the zoning text amendment Z 2017-0004 with the change that owner occupancy is not required.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion.
Can we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Hernandez?
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill?
No.
White O'Neill, I'm sorry.
No.
Commissioner Seifert?
Aye.
Chair Dickerson?
No. Okay, the motion passes. Other business. Oral reports from Planning Commission and staff. Staff?
Thank you. I'll be short and sweet. At this point in time, we don't have any items scheduled for your meetings before the end of the year. So we're proposing that we not have any more commission meetings before the holidays. So we'll leave that though on the table just to make sure we don't have any projects that really need to go. At this point, we don't, so I'll just lay that out there. And another point as well is the first meeting in January is on January 3rd, and so I would ask if you want to keep that meeting still. The city council had scratched their first meeting from that week as well because of the holiday, so you can choose
Ryan,
to keep
let me
it.
provide some clarification. Our intent is to go before the council to ask them
Council to amend it.
about the meeting on the 2nd, but staff's recommendation would be to ask that they not have a meeting on the 2nd. So we're providing a similar recommendation for the commission.
Does anyone disagree with that?
Okay.
Okay, so in theory, then the second meeting in January would be our next session, is that right?
16th.
17th?
17th, oh, okay.
Okay.
The 17th.
So
Yeah.
these
January 17th.
These are officially canceled, or just you're putting us on notice they might not happen?
I'm putting you on notice right now.
Okay.
Okay. I did have one question about study sessions. I know that Rexham Park is trying to get that art commission of theirs together, and I think their first meeting is sometime in January, and we still have to hash out who to send to it.
Oh, right.
So somewhere in December, we should probably have a study session for whatever few items there are, including that. So then we can make a decision on that.
Okay.
Or you can talk to Rexham Park and have them push that to February if that's palatable. That's fine. Any other items from staff?
I'll just add one more thing.
Yes, sir.
With the action that was taken on ADUs, we have ADUs as a scheduled item before the city council on December 5th.
Okay. All right. Anything from the commissioners? No? I know it's late, but I have two quickie things. The first is, where is Blockman School? And why do I keep getting all these phone calls from them?
Ooh. It's in Cuyama.
It's in Cuyama, isn't it?
With Sisquoc.
Oh, Sisquoc, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's right
Okay.
across the street from the Sisquoc store.
All my businesses receive robocalls from those guys telling me about whether or not we should be sending our kids on what a specific day. So I didn't know if that is pervasive throughout the community, or
You got on the wrong list. You got on a weird list.
Okay, I just want to make sure that. And then I had one other thing, and that was to follow up on Madeline, the business Madeline that's on Blosser.
What is it?
The forklift.
Yeah, the
repair.
forklift repair place. It came before us, and there was a lot of debate and discussion and contention about landscaping or any landscaping or this and that. Having driven by that many times, I see nothing of any landscaping whatsoever. It is a desolate wasteland of brick. And so I was wondering if somebody could look into that and find out why it's that way.
Sure.
That sounds more like a code enforcement matter.
Then it's on you.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
If I remember
Only
if I remember the discussion correctly, the owner was willing at the time to repaint the building, put a nice stripe, fix the signage.
Yeah.
But the landscaping required tearing up the whole parking lot.
Well, that was the front part. They did agree to trellises and climbing vines, as I recall, up against the building.
That's not happened.
No, it sure hasn't.
Okay. I think we gave them some time, but I'm
Yeah.
guessing that time has run out.
Right.
It was quite a while
We
ago
can
that we
haul
heard
off that
that.
tree that you're always talking about and put that in front of it.
I didn't bring it up. It's still there. Just saying.
I know, that's a study session item, right?
It's still there.
Does anyone have anything else? Meeting adjourned. Okay.